He tracked down the man who got the job he turned down 44 years ago. 44 years ago, Daniel Carter turned down the job he believed would change his life. Last month, at the age of 74, he boarded a plane to find the man who accepted it. He wasn't looking for an apology. He wasn't looking for someone to tell him he'd made the right decision. He simply wanted to know what had become of the life he had walked away from. The decision to make that journey began a few weeks earlier. During a routine appointment, Daniel's neurologist smiled as he finished reviewing the test results. "You're doing well," he said, "but memory changes as we get older. One day you'll probably notice pieces of your past becoming harder to reach." Driving home, Daniel realized he wasn't afraid of forgetting names. He wasn't afraid of forgetting birthdays. He was afraid of forgetting a question he had carried for 44 years. 3 weeks later, while cleaning the attic with his daughter, he opened an old wooden chest he hadn't touched in decades. Beneath faded photographs and forgotten paperwork lay a large yellow envelope. Across the front were 3 familiar words: employment offer, San Francisco, California, April 1982. His daughter looked at him. "You actually kept that?" Daniel turned the envelope over slowly. "I never kept it because of the job." He paused. "I kept it because I never stopped wondering about the man who accepted it." She smiled. "I thought you always said you never regretted staying with Grandma." "I don't." The answer came almost too quickly. Daniel looked down at the envelope. "I've never regretted choosing my mother." He hesitated. "But I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what I gave up." In the spring of 1982, Daniel was 30 years old and working as a mechanical engineer outside Chicago. The job was steady, but every evening he drove home feeling as though his life had quietly stopped moving forward. Almost on impulse, he applied for a position with a fast-growing engineering company in California. A month later, they offered him the job. The salary was nearly double what he earned. They would pay for the move. And for the first time in years, Daniel believed he could finally build the future he had imagined. That evening, he bought flowers and drove to his mother's house. She laughed when she opened the door. "Flowers? Should I be celebrating something?" Daniel grinned. "I hope so. I think my life might finally be changing." Less than 24 hours later, everything did. His aunt called before sunrise. "Daniel, it's your mother." She collapsed during the night. By noon, Daniel was sitting beside her hospital bed. The doctors believed she would recover, but not quickly. She would need someone with her for months. 3 days later, California called. "We're excited to have you on the team," the recruiter said. "We'll need your final decision by Friday." Daniel stood by the hospital window with the offer folded inside his jacket. For the first time in his life, he wanted 2 futures at once. One where he stayed beside his mother. One where, just this once, he chose himself. He asked if the company could delay his start date. The answer was no. After the call ended, Daniel remained by the window for several minutes. For one brief, shameful moment, he felt angry, not at his mother, at life. Why now? A nurse quietly adjusted the blanket over his mother. She opened her eyes just enough to see him. "You're here." Daniel forced a smile. "Of course I am." That evening, he called California one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I have to decline." The recruiter wished him well. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Neither of them knew that a single phone call had just changed 2 lives. His mother recovered. Daniel married, raised a family, built a career he was proud of, and lived a life he never considered unhappy. Yet one question refused to disappear. Not whether he had made the right decision. He believed he had. The question was much simpler. Who had lived the life he left behind? Daniel didn't buy the ticket right away. For nearly a month, the yellow envelope sat on his kitchen table. Every morning he walked past it. Every evening he picked it up. More than once, he came close to throwing it away. Not because he no longer cared, because he wasn't sure he wanted the truth anymore. His daughter noticed. "So, Have you decided? Daniel rested his hand on the envelope. I think I have. What if it changes nothing? He smiled. Maybe, but I'm not looking for an answer anymore. I'm looking for the end of the question. A week later, he boarded a flight to California. The company that had offered Daniel the job no longer existed. Most of its records had disappeared years earlier. Daniel spent weeks making phone calls and following one dead end after another before a retired human resources director finally returned one of his messages. I found him. There had been only one engineer hired after Daniel declined the position, Thomas Whitaker. Daniel wrote the name on a small piece of paper and slipped it into his wallet. For 44 years, Thomas had existed only in Daniel's imagination. Now he had a name, an address, a real life. Thomas's house sat on a quiet suburban street. It wasn't impressive. It simply looked lived in. There were flowers near the front porch, a weathered mailbox, an old bicycle leaning against the garage, the kind of home that had slowly grown with a family over many years. Daniel stood at the front door longer than he expected. Then, he rang the bell. A woman in her late 50s answered. Can I help you? My name is Daniel Carter. I was hoping to speak with Thomas Whitaker. The smile disappeared from her face. I'm sorry. My father passed away 6 months ago. Daniel lowered his eyes. I'm sorry to hear that. She noticed the old envelope tucked beneath his arm. Were you friends? Daniel gently shook his head. No, we never met. She frowned. I'm afraid I don't understand. Daniel took a slow breath. 44 years ago, I turned down a job. Your father accepted it. She looked at him without saying a word. Then, almost cautiously, she asked, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why now? Daniel looked down at the envelope before answering. A few weeks ago, my doctor told me there may come a day when I won't remember every part of my life. He smiled faintly. I realized I'd hate to forget this question before I finally answered it. The woman studied him for another moment. Then she slowly opened the screen door. My name's Emily. I think Dad would have wanted to hear this story. The house felt warm in the quiet way family homes often do. Books filled the shelves. Photographs covered almost every wall. One showed Thomas teaching a grandson how to fish. Another captured him standing proudly beside a vegetable garden. In another, he was grinning next to an old motorcycle that looked as though it had been taken apart more times than it had ever been ridden. Daniel smiled. He liked fixing motorcycles? Emily laughed. He liked starting. Finishing was another story. She smiled at the photograph. Dad had a bad habit of bringing work home. He missed a few birthdays because of deadlines. When I was little, I thought every father worked that much. She paused. It took me years to realize he was just trying to give us a better life. Daniel nodded quietly. I think a lot of fathers do that. Emily disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of coffee. For a while, they talked about ordinary things. Retirement, children growing up, parents getting older, the strange silence that fills a house after the children move away. Only then did Daniel tell her why he had come. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she smiled softly. You know, my father mentioned you once. Daniel looked up. He did. He didn't know your name. But every few years he'd mention the man who turned the job down. Daniel couldn't help smiling. I spent 44 years wondering about him. Emily nodded. Looks like he spent a few years wondering about you too. She walked to a bookshelf and returned with a worn leather journal. My dad wasn't much of a writer, she said. This is mostly reminders, family trips, and things he didn't want to forget. She placed it gently on the table. I think there's one page you'd like to read. Daniel opened the journal. The first entries were exactly what Emily had described. Oil changes, doctor appointments, his granddaughter's piano recital, a reminder to fix the kitchen sink. Then, one short entry caught his attention. April 19th, 1982. Started the new job today. Manager said another applicant turned it down. Guess I got lucky. Daniel smiled. There was nothing poetic about it. It sounded exactly like something an engineer would write after a long first day. Emily quietly reached over and turned several pages. He wrote about it one more time, years later. Daniel lowered his eyes to the next page and held his breath. The handwriting was noticeably older now. The letters were slower, less careful, written by someone who no longer cared about neatness as much as remembering. He began to read. October 2008. Dad passed away today. I got there 20 minutes too late. I keep thinking that if I'd skipped one meeting, maybe I would have made it. That's probably not true, but it's the story I'll be telling myself for a while. Daniel stopped reading, without realizing it. He had been holding his breath. He closed his eyes for a moment. 44 years earlier, he had stood beside his own mother's hospital bed wondering what his future might cost him. Thomas had chosen differently. Yet somehow, they had both ended up asking the same question. What if I had been there? Emily quietly broke the silence. My grandfather got sick very suddenly. Dad was out of town. She glanced toward an old family photograph. He used to say work gave him a career, but it couldn't give him back those last 20 minutes. Daniel nodded. For years, he had imagined Thomas living a life without sacrifice. Now he understood something he never had before. Thomas hadn't escaped regret. He had simply inherited a different one. Daniel turned another page. Years had passed. The final entry mentioning the mysterious applicant was surprisingly short. June 2020. Ran into an old co-worker today. He joked that I owed my career to the fellow who turned the job down back in '82. Funny thing is, I still think about him sometimes. I hope life turned out well for him. I hope he never spent too much time wondering about mine. Daniel read the last line twice. Then he slowly closed the journal. For 44 years, he had imagined another man living the better life. Meanwhile, that man had simply hoped Daniel was happy. Emily smiled gently. My dad wasn't perfect. He worked too much. He missed birthdays. He carried regrets he rarely talked about. But if there's one thing he finally figured out, she looked toward the family photographs. It was that no career could ever replace time with the people you love. Daniel stood and slowly walked around the room. He paused in front of the photographs. Thomas teaching his grandson to fish. Thomas laughing beside the old motorcycle he never quite finished. Thomas wearing an oversized gardening hat while his family laughed behind the camera. Looking around the room, Daniel realized something. Thomas hadn't lived a perfect life. He had simply lived one, just like everyone else, just like him. Daniel turned back to Emily. I've spent 44 years asking the wrong question. She smiled. And what's the right one? Daniel looked at the journal resting on the table. I shouldn't have been asking whether your father had the better life. He smiled. I should have been asking whether I appreciated my own. Neither of them spoke again. The silence felt lighter now, almost peaceful. On the flight home, Daniel never opened the yellow envelope. For the first time in 44 years, he didn't need to. Instead, he found himself thinking about moments that had never seemed important at the time. His mother's laugh from the kitchen, his wife singing off-key while making dinner, teaching his son to drive, watching his daughter leave for college. None of those memories had been extraordinary. They had simply been life. And somehow, that made them extraordinary after all. His daughter picked him up at the airport. As they drove home, she finally asked, "So, did you find what you were looking for?" Daniel smiled. "No." She glanced over. "No. I found something better." "What?" He looked out the window at the passing neighborhoods before answering. "I stopped comparing my life to someone else's." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. That evening, Daniel climbed into the attic one last time. He placed the yellow envelope back inside the old wooden chest. For a few seconds, he rested his hand on the lid. Then he closed it, switched off the light, and walked downstairs. His daughter looked up from the dining table. "Dad, dinner's ready." Daniel smiled. I'm coming. The yellow envelope stayed in the attic. The question did not.